Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Akakadash, double honors and salutations to the elders and apostles of the ministry who well, to the Akim Akwaf, try the falcons of the earth, holding on sincerity and truth and diligence of mind to the gospel of Lord the Messiah Yahweh Shai, in these days and times, Bram Nasha, DC Camp, short lesson for the hopeful elect. On the screen, you have a family that's got ties to the country of Togo and to Germany. All right. So it's just that when you understand how Esau was able to split Africa up during the so-called Berlin Conference, he was able to carve it up according to the interests. Because when you read the articles as part of the Berlin Conference from 1884 to 1885. It says it was an international summit where European powers negotiated and formalized claims to African territory. It essentially established the legal rules for the scramble for Africa, dictating how the continent will be carved up without any African leaders present. All right, so that's the conspiracy. All right, that's what you call the conspiracy between the nations of the EU. Okay, all right, your so-called EU nations, your so-called NATO members. You have the French, you have the Germans, you have the British. You also have the Spanish. All right, then you have the Portuguese there too. All right, so that's what they did. You know, to Africa, they had to split it up. And what did they also do? They mingled their seed over there. So you have a lot of people over there in West Africa. That are descendants of Edom. All right, so it's one of those agendas you have to be aware of. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and 8, when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. So ever since 70 AD, when our foreparents had to flee out of the land into the different regions, including the interiors of Africa, that's what you get. The diaspora, the dispersion. All right. So that's a wave of people being spread out to other geographical regions on the earth. Okay, so you have to remember that this migration, violence, became a catalyst, for the migration of our people, for them to survive. So you have to remember that, man. As Esau sowed his sin among our people, now you have to deal with the parable of the wheat and tares. So I played the video.
Has lost their German citizenship because of a racist law during German colonial times. How can this be? Let's rewind. The Liebel family came from Togo to Germany in early 2020. They entered the country with their German passports, which the German embassy in Togo issued in 2019. That's because Ami Tido Liebel and her two sisters had a great German grandfather. Back in 1908, he married the African great-grandmother in what is today Togo, then under German colonial rule. This marriage wasn't accepted by the German imperial law as it was a so-called mixed marriage. That's why German authorities now say that the Liebel family mistakenly received the passports and the citizenship never existed.
Dass die Familie Liebel jetzt so behandelt wird, als wäre sie illegal eingereist. Was natürlich absolut grotesk ist. Sie hatten einen deutschen Pass, sie haben hier sogar an einer Wahl teilgenommen und plötzlich sind sie illegal.
So this racist law continues to impact the lives of the Liebel family members today, creating numerous hurdles and huge uncertainty. But that's not all. The family of 8 was obliged to give up their Togolese citizenship to obtain the German one, which means now they are stateless. And that means German authorities have cut the family's social benefits because they are now considered undocumented immigrants who entered the country illegally, despite their German heritage and despite following all the procedures needed to the letter. The family's lawyer is now fighting for the residence permit and ultimately to get back their German citizenship. This family has lost their German citizenship because of a racist law during German colonial times.
Yeah, so that's what I have to deal with, man. You know, when you're looking at Esau's empires, Esau's system. So the book of Matthew, chapter 13, 24 says, another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. All right? So that good seed, that represents the nation of Israel, and the field is the earth. All right, when you go deep into the breakdown. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. Yeah. So when our people, became ignorant and not diligent, when they fell away from following laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, they basically make themselves a target, and that's how Edom was able to sow their seed among our people, starting with when you talk about Edom, starting with the Greeks, even the Babylonians too, even the Persians also too, even the Egyptians. So when our people fall into the hands of the enemy, you're always going to have a situation of the tares being mingled in there. So that's why you have a lot of turmoil in the neighborhoods, man, where Jake is, because you have a lot of violence, you have a clash of spirits. You don't understand what is going on unless you have a spiritual perspective, right? And then verse 26, but when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also, right? So when our people begin to grow and be productive and to flourish, you're always going to have that element of the of those that have been mingled among our people, and then they get abandoned. So what do? We just take hold of them. They go to they go to the same places we go to. Basically they become the same unit. Begin to operate similarly, but at the end of the day, spiritually, the Lord has to make that differentiation. Just like where you have all those cities in the South, in the Midwest, on the Eastern Seaboard, those places where the Jakes had to rebuild those towns. You have Jakes that had to build, and then you also have the tares also, man. So it was a mixture of the abandoned children of Edom and the children of Israel, living in the same town, so it's just how it is. That's how the enemy can also take advantage of divisions, divide and conquer. So that's the element. It's basically a strategy of war, divide and conquer, create confusion. That's why this place is called Babylon, all right? Yeah, so verse 27 says, So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, did not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? All right. And then you just have to remember, man, only the angels of the Lord have that authority from the Lord Hamashiach Yahushai to bring about that separation, man. We basically got to wait on the Most High's authorization to bring about judgment upon the earth, right? Yeah, that's just how it is. Verse 28 says, And he said unto them, An enemy had done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And when is the harvest? We're getting closer to the harvest. That's the seventh trump, all right? That's the time of Jacob's trouble, where the Lord Hamashiach Yahushai will have to show up, during the seventh trump to deliver us from the chaos that's upon the face of the earth. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Yeah. So that's the challenge we have to deal with. As an Israelite, you have to learn to wait upon the Lord to strengthen your resolve. And when you also read Matthew 24 and 35, Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. Yeah, so you have to understand that our people, man, they get too tied up with Esau's immigration system that they forget the Lord. They begin to stress themselves out just to have a opportunity of survival, psychological. But then when you have the Spirit of the Lord moving you properly, you begin to understand that there are better ways to view the world, to view the process. When you understand prophecy, you understand why this family is going through this chaos. That's just how it is, because Germany is going to start following the so-called MAGA, MAGA doctrine, man. They're going to start tightening up on their immigration rules, man. So it's just how it is. That's just what Esau does when he's had his way. He wants to discard. But Esau doesn't really care about spiritual things, man. He only cares about carnal things. As long as you don't physically, let me say, as long as the person physically looks like an Edomite, hey, that's what he cares about. And then he has to make sure that he keeps that narrative going, man. He likes to leave out the elements of his past, the elements of his footsteps around the world. He doesn't like to talk about it in his history books. They don't want to talk about slavery. They don't want to talk about their escapades, their pilgrimages, or whatever they want to call it, their adventures to the different nations of the earth and how they spread their seed. So it's just how you have to understand why Esau's kingdom is it's filled with confusion. He doesn't want to admit the truth. It's always sowing discord. That's exactly what the Lord has already talked about. That He hates a person that sows discord among brethren. All right. So when you look at the book of Isaiah 30 and 1, it tells you about the covering. There are people always looking to Egypt, man, to give them some status rather than looking to the Lord. And then when you read Isaiah 25 and 7, it tells you what the Lord has to do. So whatever covering people have been holding on to from Isaiah 31 and 2, the Lord has to rip it apart in Isaiah 25 and 7. Isaiah 25 and 7, and He will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. All right. So the parable of the wheat and the tare becomes clearer, as the Lord begins to unravel the mysteries. All right. So that's what we're looking forward to. The book of Romans, chapter 8 and 16, it tells you clearly that the Spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. Okay, so our inheritance, all right, is with the Lord. It's not with Edom. Verse 17, and if children, then heirs of Yahweh Hashem Shai, and join heirs with Hamashiach. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. And that's what it boils down to. You have to make sure that you are able to stay the course and hold on to the end, man, because you have to deal with the conflicts in Babylon, and you want to be able to make it, to that time of the harvest, the time of the seventh trump, with your faith intact. And you just wonder, man, how long will our people want to be seeking asylum from Esau's system, man? It's after a while, it becomes tiring, and then the Lord will have to pull the plug. So that's about it for this lesson, man. The parable of wheat and tares, man, it's a heavy topic we have to deal with, on a daily basis. That's why it's important to have some patience in the spirit. Just don't move by sight. You have to move with faith. Let the Spirit move you, so you don't get beside yourself, man, because it's the Most High's program. So you have to learn to yield. You don't want to be made a spectacle, for being ignorant. So you better allow the wisdom of the Lord, to guide you as you move forward. Yeah, you don't want to push the wrong doctrine. You don't want to go around claiming that the tares can be saved. It doesn't work that way. That's a clear example right there that Lord Hamashiach Yahushua had made sure. All right. So there's no salvation for the other nations, man. The tares had to be gotten rid of, man. Shalom.